Before George Washington became famous. Before his face appeared on money. Before history books remembered his name. He was just a boy. George Washington was born in 1732, in a place called Virginia. At that time, America did not exist as a country. It was controlled by Britain, far across the ocean. Life was simple, but hard. People worked on farms. Children helped their families. Education was a luxury. When George was 11 years old, his father died. This changed his life forever. Without his father, George could not go to a good school. But instead of giving up, he taught himself. He read books. He copied rules about good behavior. He watched how leaders spoke and acted. Even as a child, George learned something important: discipline creates strength. At the age of 16, George Washington left home. He did not leave to study. He did not leave to fight. He left to explore the wilderness. George became a land surveyor. This meant walking through forests, crossing rivers, and measuring land no one had mapped before. There were no roads. No safety. Only nature. This work was dangerous. But it made George strong, in body and mind. He learned patience. He learned accuracy. He learned how land shapes power. Years later, this knowledge would help him win a war. At 16, he did not know his future. But the land was already teaching him leadership. In his early 20s, George Washington became a soldier. Britain and France were fighting for control of North America. George was brave. But he was young. He was given command of soldiers for the first time. And he failed. His decisions led to defeat. Men were lost. Mistakes were made. This moment could have destroyed his future. But George Washington did something rare. He accepted responsibility. He studied military strategy. He learned from British officers. He became more careful. From failure, he gained wisdom. And wisdom is more powerful than confidence. George Washington married Martha Custis. She was wealthy and respected. Together, they lived at Mount Vernon, a large plantation. George now had status, money, influence. But something troubled him. Britain controlled the colonies. Taxes were increasing. Colonists had no voice in decisions. Washington did not want rebellion. But he wanted fairness. Slowly, his loyalty to Britain began to fade. Not because he loved war. But because he believed freedom mattered. When war finally began, the colonies needed a leader. They chose George Washington. Not because he was loud. Not because he demanded power. But because people trusted him. The army was weak. Poorly trained. Cold. Hungry. Washington stayed with his soldiers. He suffered with them. He encouraged them. Even when defeat seemed certain, he refused to quit. Leadership, he believed, meant endurance. Against all odds, the colonies survived. And then, they won. George Washington stood at the height of power. Many wanted him to rule like a king. He refused. Instead, he resigned. He went home. The world was shocked. Later, when the new nation struggled, the people asked him to lead again. Reluctantly, he accepted. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. There were no rules. No examples. Everything he did set a standard. After 2 terms, he stepped down. Once again, he gave up power. And by doing so, he protected democracy. George Washington was not perfect. But he showed the world that leadership is service. That power should be limited. And that character matters more than ambition. From a quiet boy to a global symbol of leadership. This is why George Washington is remembered.